No, not right now. Okay, we'll stick around after. Maybe we'll have some after the presentation. Mick, and turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you all for coming out today. All right. In case you don't know who I am, I'm the new executive director here at the Seminole Theater. I'm so thankful to the Homestead Center for the Arts for asking me to do this. Although, as probably the newest resident of Homestead, it might seem funny that I'm giving the history of anything in Homestead. So I'm going to ask your forgiveness in advance. This is my disclaimer in advance. But I think that we've dug up some interesting things that I hope you'll come away with some new knowledge of the Seminole and some new appreciation, and will be with us moving forward. I also need to throw out big thanks to two of my victims here today, who I've roped in at the 11th hour. Yvonne Knowles is part of the Seminole Cultural Arts Theater Board, as well as the executive director for Homestead Main Street, and she got the call this morning that she'd be helping me out. And Harriet Devine, of course, is with Homestead Center for the Arts, and she got the tap on the shoulder about 5 minutes ago. So please be patient with them even more than you would with me. So because we're sort of throwing this all together, and I really want this to be a community participation sort of thing. So if you hear something I say that you'd like to add on to, you have a memory you'd like to share, or you hear something I say that's just completely wrong, just yell it out. It'll be a community thing. Everybody will share your combined experiences. Fair? Cool? All right, so without further ado, the history of the Majestic Theater. Come on! That was a test! Tough crowd. All right, the history of the Seminole Theater. The history of the Seminole Theater in Homestead, I think, dates even further past this building that we're in right now. And so I really want to take us back to what I think is the beginning of having movies and entertainment in Homestead, which really dates back to the beginning of Homestead. So you probably know a lot of these stories, but they're still interesting to me, so I'm going to tell them anyway. Homestead, as you probably know, is the second oldest city in Miami-Dade County, after only Miami. The area was open to local homesteaders in 1898. Then in 1904, Henry Flagler decided to extend the railway from Miami to Key West. And of course, that goes down what's now Flagler Avenue, used to be the old railway. The terminal stop in the area as they were built it, they didn't have a town name, so they called it the Homestead Country, which later became just Homestead. Many of the railroad workers decided to settle down in the area after they built the railroad, and so what you had was the beginnings of a small little town, and Homestead was incorporated in 1913. This picture is actually probably closer to 1926, but you get the idea. It's a small town. Obviously, with this influx of people in this new town, people needed something to do, right? There wasn't a whole lot to do other than farm. So one of the things we thought, one of the things that's easy to put in place would be a movie theater. Now, the first place that movies were available in Homestead, according to the histories, is actually in a place called Sistrunk Hall in 1913, which would have been just south of us on Maury, where the old police station is now. There was an old wooden building called Sistrunk Hall, and that's where they first started showing movies in 1913. In 1916, a man named James Washington English, also known as Jim or J.W. English, had the Air Dome Theater in Miami. So this was a theater already in Miami. He had the theater disassembled, put on a train, because remember we have the train line to Homestead. It was brought on a train down and it was reassembled on Flagler Avenue. And that, it was originally opened in 1960 under the name the Homestead Garden Theater. And then by 1919, the name was changed to the Seminole Theater. So that was the beginnings of the Seminole Theater in Homestead. I think here we have one of the original movie posters from that Seminole Theater. So just as a point of reference for movies in this time period, I think it's important to look at sort of what was happening in the film landscape in the US. The films in the US really didn't even start until the 1890s, which that was when motion picture cameras were first invented, was in the 1890s. But of course at that time, it was really more of a novelty They weren't doing full-length feature films. They weren't even really able to get beyond 1 minute of a single camera shot. So it was a cool thing, but it wasn't something you paid money to go into a theater and watch because you would have been pretty upset about it. So it really wasn't until the late 1890s that movies started developing as more of an entertainment form. In 1897, the first film studio opened, they were able to develop movies into several minutes long, and they would comprise several different shots from different cameras. Another thing that I think is really interesting is the first permanent movie theater in the US that was built to show movies was not opened until 1905. It was called the Nickelodeon, and it was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So if you think about it, that's only 11 years before we had a permanent theater in Homestead was the first permanent movie theater in the US. So looking at it, it was fairly cutting edge that in 1916, James English had the idea to bring a movie theater to Homestead and show movies here. So moving on. So the movie theaters opened were in the 1910s. 1910 saw a huge boom in the movie industry. Obviously, theaters are opening up everywhere, just like they were in Homestead. In the early 1900s, it was actually very difficult for independent filmmakers to make movies because all of the patents were held by Thomas Edison's Motion Picture Patents Company. So if you were an independent filmmaker, you would be sued by Thomas Edison's company and told to stop production. Well, that wasn't very helpful for the movie industry, so what happened is many filmmakers moved out west. And they moved out west because nobody could catch them there. They could get away with filming their own movies and nobody could enforce the patents. And of course they got out there and they said, hey, it's actually kind of nice out here. Also, it's warm all year round. We have lots of different settings. And so Los Angeles bloomed as the film capital, right? So in the 1910s, where are we? Oh, also 1910, this is an interesting fact. 1910 was the first year that actors started receiving billing for movies. Prior to that point, movies were only sold based on the studio that they came from. And it wasn't until 1910 that they started actually advertising and selling the movies based on the actors and the stars who were in it. So I just wanted to point all that out to show you that, in 1913, 1916, when movies started being shown in Homestead, this was still very young in the film industry, and that's why it's so cool that the history of the Seminole goes back all the way that far. Obviously, in 1913 and 1916, there was no sound yet in films. Everything would have been silent films. And while we don't have a record of exactly what films played, we can guess that probably some of the more popular films of the time would have made their way through Homestead, including Tarzan of the Apes, Sherlock Holmes, Snow White, and of course, Star Wars. Just making sure you're still awake. All right. But back to Homestead and the Seminole Theater, now that we've sort of covered some of the film history. Jim English, who ran the movie theater over on Flagler Avenue at only 30 years old, married a woman named Gussie E. Joyner, who is the owner of the Seminole Cafe and Hotel, which is in the same location. Gussie was older than Jim, and in fact, she had a son who was the same age as Jim. You might say she was perhaps the first cougar of Homestead, but that's a lecture for a different day. The marriage was short-lived, and after the divorce, Jim English and his business partner, Henry Booker, built a new concrete theater on Chrome Avenue, if that sounds familiar to you. And when they built this new theater, they took the name the Seminole Theater with them. So of course, the place where you're sitting right now today was that new location that Jim English and Henry Booker built, the new Seminole Theater. The old theater on Flagler Avenue was converted to a 26-room hotel, and it later changed its name to the Landmark Hotel. You might notice it's actually still there today. Oh wait, that's Jim English. I forgot to show you that. That's James Washington English. And there is the Landmark Hotel. You might recognize that. You can still see it on Flagler Avenue. And I haven't been inside, but I've heard the old ticket booth is still in the lobby. So that's the beginnings of the Seminole Theater right there. So the Seminole continued to operate in the 1920s and the 1930s, at which time the movie industry also continued to change. Sound technology was developed, and so suddenly you could record sound and you could play it simultaneously with the picture. These new movies were called talking films, or just talkies for short. The first full-length feature talkie presented was in 1927, and it was The Jazz Singer, starring Al Jolson, which I think is a movie many people recognize. I also have up here a picture of Singing in the Rain. Obviously, that was not a movie of the 1920s or 1930s. That was from the 1950s, but it was a comedic portrayal of actors during the time of transitioning from these silent films to these talking films, and how that completely changed the movie industry. And of course, that all would have been happening in Homestead as well, in the Seminole Theater. These are some of the famous movies of the 1930s. These would have been new talkies, and these likely would have been in this, well, not this building, we'll get to that, but in this location in the Seminole Theater. Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, and again, Snow White, but this time Walt Disney's Snow White. So the theater continued to prosper in the 20s and 30s, but by 1940, disaster struck the Seminole Theater for the first time. On March 8, 1940, a fire broke out on the stage. It's not known exactly what the cause of the fire was, but it is known that everything was destroyed except for the 4 concrete walls. The entire interior was damaged. You can see this is a picture taken shortly thereafter. It's just complete devastation. It was decided that nothing could be salvaged from the old theater, so it was demolished and it was completely rebuilt. Florida theater architect Roy A. Benjamin was engaged to design the new theater. Benjamin was an architect based in Jacksonville and designed several theaters in Jacksonville and the surrounding areas, including the Sarasota Opera House, which is on the top right there. That one has been remodeled since, obviously. The Imperial Theater in Augusta, Georgia, which is in the top left. The San Marco Theater in Jacksonville, which is on the bottom right, and I think shares most similarities with the Seminole Theater. And also bottom left is another theater he designed. I believe it's the Ritz Theater, also in Georgia. Benjamin elected to design the new theater in the design of the then popular Art Moderne or Streamline Moderne design, which was sort of an offshoot of the Art Deco style that you can see so much in Miami and the South Beach area. The style features rounded edges, chrome hardware, smooth exterior surfaces, which are generally stucco, and subdued colors. The design elements from this theater can still be seen in the restored facade out front today of the Seminole. You can see, not so much the smooth edges, but definitely the stucco, the smooth facade, and the colors now are a little bit more vibrant, but still not that vibrant. We've kept to the sort of subdued purples and greens and lighter colors to stick with that modern style. So the new Seminole Theater, built in 1940, flourished in the 1940s and 50s as not only a movie theater, but also as a cultural center for Homestead. The Seminole was known to host live entertainment during the day, such as beauty contests, cooking demonstrations, other things that might have been very popular, especially in the 1950s, when you're seeing a lot of that type of entertainment. I had a gentleman that was going to be a guest today, and unfortunately he couldn't make it. His name was Fred Rhodes. And Fred has a very fond memory of being in the Seminole Theater after he returned to Homestead after World War II. And although he's not here today, I do have his story. I'd like to read it to you, and you'll just have to pretend that I'm a much more charming older gentleman who cares much more about this story. But I think that you'll still love it. Fred says, "I found love at the Seminole Theater in Homestead in 1946. I had just returned home from World War II. A friend of mine, Bill Forte, and I were going to see Cary Grant in Mr. Lucky." You can see there's a poster of that movie. One Monday night in July. We were walking in to buy a Coke and some popcorn. There was a young red-headed girl in front of us in the line at the concession stand with her parents. So we had to wait to get waited on ourselves. I never got a look at her face, only that beautiful red hair. She kept her back to us. So we followed her and her parents to their seats and sat right behind them. I was hoping that I would be able to learn her name. I wanted her to look at me. When the movie was over, they got up to leave, and of course we followed them outside. I wanted to see what kind of automobile they were driving. I asked Bill to see if his girlfriend, Melba Collins, if she knew who the red-headed girl was. Melba called me the next day, that she was the daughter of the Lees and that they lived out on Hanlon Mills Road in the Redland area. Melba said that the girl is their daughter, Joy Lee, who is a freshman at Stetson in DeLand. I called Melba if she could call Joy to see if she would like to go to a movie and grab a hamburger at Dick's Drive-In. Melba called me to say that Joy said no. I was heartbroken. I had to wait a week to ask Melba to give me Joy's phone number so I could ask her about a date myself. I waited until the next day to call Joy. When I called Joy, I asked if she would like to go on a date with me, grab a burger and a Coke, and she agreed this time. Now remember, if you didn't catch it, he still has not seen this girl's face. All he's seen is her red hair sitting in front of her at the theater, but he's decided there's no other redheaded girls in Homestead because it's a small town. So he saw her in the theater and he knew he had to take her out on a date. The day finally arrived. I drove out to Hanlon Mills Road, about 8 miles in the Redlands, to pick up Joy for our date. When I knocked on the door, her father answered. He asked if I was Fred Rhodes. I said, "Yes, sir, I am. I have a movie date with your daughter." He said, "Yes, I know that. She's not quite ready yet." He said, "We have some restrictions for her dates. You must have her home before 11 p.m. And I don't mean in the yard, on the porch. I mean in the house by 11 p.m. If you are late, you don't need to come back." I promised him that I could do that. He invited me in to listen to the new radio. I sat down to wait for Joy. I waited and waited till she finally came out into the living room. When I looked up, I like to have fainted when I saw the prettiest girl I've ever laid eyes on. She was gorgeous in every way. I fell in love at that moment. I think she fell in love with me too, right then and there. We finished our date, which he doesn't say in this story, but they came back to the Seminole Theater to see a movie. We finished our date, had many more over the next year. Joy finished her college in late May that year and never looked back. We were married the next June at her family's house in the yard on Hanlon Mills Drive in Redlands, Florida. We were married for 62 years, had 2 beautiful children. Our son, Curtis Robin Rode, he works for an electrical company in Dallas, Texas. Our daughter, Charisse, is a teacher in Boca Raton. My Joy passed away with Alzheimer's disease in 2010. I miss her every day of my life. I'm lost and sad with her in heaven. I know she is there. Only people real nice like my Joy go there for sure. Now that the Seminole Theater is open again, maybe some lucky couple will find love and happiness like my Joy and I did. We had some very great years together. Lots of good times and rough times, lots of laughs, lots of love, plenty of family and friends to enjoy it with, plus 2 great kids. I can still close my eyes and relive that night I first met the angel that was to be the love of my life. I still love her today and always, Fred Rhodes, Jr. So again, just pretend that was actually Fred telling you the story. I just think that's such a fantastic story and shows you how the Seminole was such an important part of Homestead during these years that people would show up there and everybody knew everybody. And if you saw somebody you didn't know, I don't know anybody with red hair, and so you'd track that person down. And that was just a wonderful story, and I think we hope the theater will now be that place again, that people will come out for dates because it is right downtown Homestead and people don't have to go to Miami or go anywhere else. They can stay right in town and have those types of experiences. But anyway, back to the story of the Seminole and of Homestead. Now again, the story of the history of the town influenced what was happening with the theater. After World War II, the U.S. instituted an act called the Mexican Farm Labor Agreement, or Bracero Program, which encouraged Mexican immigration to the U.S. to work in agricultural areas. The program lasted from 1942 to 1964, and this period saw a change of demographics in Homestead, along with many other southern states. By the 1960s and 70s, there was a need for Spanish language entertainment in Homestead and other areas. In 1972, the Seminole changed hands to a gentleman named Arturo de Leon, who operated the theater under the name the Premier Theater. During this time, the theater showed Spanish language films, primarily from the Azteca Film Company in Austin, Texas. And there you can see a couple of posters from the Azteca Film Company. And these would have been primarily Spanish language films played in this building as it was operated as the Premier Theater. The theater closed in 1979 due to declining attendance, as well as the rise of other alternate movie theaters in Homestead, most of which are actually all gone. These included the Palms Theater and another theater on the corner of Campbell Drive and US 1, although I don't know the name of it. It might have been the Ritz Theater. Does anybody know? Nobody knows. It's a mystery. Moving on, though. In 1992, disaster struck the Seminole Theater once again. This is well known to most people in the audience. Hurricane Andrew struck in August 1992, at the time as the most destructive hurricane in the history of the U.S. Andrew hit South Florida as a Category 5 hurricane and went directly through Homestead. Most of Homestead and the surrounding areas were devastated, and the Seminole Theater was not spared. While the four walls stood, again, the four walls seem to always stand, the roof was taken off and the interior was severely damaged. The owner, Arturo de Leon, donated the theater to the city, and shortly after, it was designated a historic landmark. In 1997, a nonprofit group called the Seminole Cultural Arts Theater was formed with the purpose of restoring and managing the theater as a performing arts center. At this point, I always joke with my wife, who happens to be a high school history teacher, that I think some of the worst recorded history is recent history because people don't yet realize that it needs to be recorded. So as I'm doing all the research on the Seminole Theater and the history, I'm realizing we get up to this point and there's not very much documented about what has happened from 1997 to the present. Of course, everybody knows the past year, it's gone under major renovations, but tons have happened since then. And so I'd love to turn it over to Yvonne Knowles from the Seminole Cultural Arts Theater Board, who can fill in a lot of those details from that time period.
Thank you, Mickey. If many of you know, I'm fairly new to the community, but I did join the board in 2004, so I was part of this transition from the private community board to the city of Homestead taking it back and running the theater. I'm going to read also a little bit of the history because it's put together by people who preceded me on the board, and their contribution is important. The Seminole Theater began as a vision by a local farmer, then Miami-Dade County Commissioner Katie Sorensen's aide, Gabrielle Maruski. I think you all know Gabrielle and her Paradise Farms in the Redland. Pardon me, Bob. When the city of Homestead put out a request for a proposal on what to do with the historic Seminole Theater after Hurricane Andrew this was in 1997. Gabrielle would talk to Betty Calabrese, the owner of the Kingswood Montessori School in the Redland, and Susan Probinski, wife of local attorney Brent Probinski, about the RFP during their visits to Betty's school. Both their children were in school at that time at the Kingswood Montessori School. Betty came to local architect Robert Barnes' office and told that she would like to introduce him to Susan Probinski, and that the three would try to build a performing arts center together in the old Seminole Theater. Over time, Susan and Robert would team up together and work alongside each other to try and make that vision a reality. Many days and lots of time was spent doing research, coming up with design ideas, and building community support for renovating the original movie theater. It was the group's intention to have at this point, Robert Barnes was the architect for this restoration project. Robert agreed to donate an office down the street in his architectural studio at 271 Chrome Avenue, and Susan found Dory Gold to serve as the executive director. Dory was a performing arts specialist whose accomplishments included bringing the Actors Theater at the Biltmore in Coral Gables to fruition. This group then continued on. I don't know exactly how they evolved into the group that we have today. I came in 2004, and at that point the board was run by Robert Zoltan, and we had some new members on the board. So this was the genesis of this redevelopment of this existing theater. When they were looking at the theater, it was a 7,000 square foot movie theater, and in about 2004, there was a study put together by the Bristol, I'm getting ahead of myself. 2004, there was a decision maybe we should go into a much larger concept and make it more of a performing arts center. In 2012, there was the Bristol report that was done by the Bristol Strategy Group, talking about the benefits of having a children's theater in this particular location. And at that point, the idea was to take the south building and add that to the square footage. So what was a 7,000 square foot movie theater renovation became a 12,400 square foot performing arts center project. And that's the evolution of what was originally a concept of just bringing a movie theater back to a performing arts center, which we are looking at today. The architects went through quite a few changes. There was another group that was brought on by the city, and Duncan Webb, his business plan, I think many of you have heard about Duncan Webb's report. That's what really evolved into what we see today as the Performing Arts Center. The board worked on many different projects. They were getting funding, and they weren't getting funding. They were getting promises of funding, and they weren't getting funding. A lot of things happened in Homestead politically, and it was kind of an unfortunate situation that the theater seemed to be always the victim of changes in planning and changes in strategy and changes in promises. But under Mayor Roscoe Warren, $1.4 million had been set aside, $1.5 million, to do the renovation that was going to be put in the bank, and there was going to be matching funds, so $3 million was going to be spent back in 2007. That got tabled. The city then went, the board then went, with the help of Councilman Judy Waldman, went to Katie Sorensen and got a promise of $800,000, and that, actually $1 million, and we spent at that point $800,000 for the renovation that was turned over to the city, and that was the south building being begun as far as a two-story building that was framed out, the 6-story flag tower, and under here, the orchestra pit. So that was dug out. So then in the north end of the building was also extended. So for $800,000, a lot of work was done, and it was through a very tight budget. And Jim Harris, our local contractor, was involved. It was extraordinary how much was done for just that small amount of money, if you know construction costs today. At that point in 2014, we have a new change in our city government. George Gressis came on board, super supportive of downtown. As the Main Street Director, I've been working so hard at our board to see the focus return to downtown, get City Hall back down here, bring the library back downtown, and certainly finish this theater. So having a manager like George Gressis with his vision of how important an urban core is to a community, we finally had somebody on our side who was really going to make this thing happen. And he said, we need to get the voters behind this, and a general obligation bond is the way to go. If they pass it, that means the community is behind it. If they don't, there's no will to have this theater completed, and we have to come up with Plan B. So I think the extraordinary thing is we went out there, we knocked on doors as a board, and we really met with the community, and all the doors I knocked on, all the people I talked to, I was impressed by the fact that so many people said, yes, this theater has to be completed, and yes, we support the general obligation bond, which you all know passed, $5 million was approved, and this project was completed. So it was a lot of fits and starts, but I think having this thing finally done and sitting in the theater today is testament to the will of a few people who saw the vision and the will of the community that made that vision a realization.
Thank you.
Well, there's a lot of information here that I had never heard before. I'm Harriet Devine, and I'm on the Homestead Center for the Arts Board. And I have been knowing about the Seminole Theater since before I moved here in 2000. I think it was maybe 1999 that my granddaughter and I were part of a volunteer group that actually arrived here with other volunteers with shovels to help get some of the debris out of the Seminole Theater, and you could look up and see the sky. So 16 years later, here I sit. There's a lot more work to be done, And I hope that all of you that are here today will keep your eye on the progress of the Seminole Theater. There are offices and classrooms that will be completed. I know that Mickey is looking forward to having all of the construction actually finished and done. This first round of concerts is really to find what you want to see, and what you're interested in having in this theater. And Homestead Center for the Arts is very, very happy to be able to support the theater, support Mickey, support you in getting your requests to the powers that be, this young man sitting right here. And I want for all of us to give him a big round of applause and a big welcome to Homestead.
Well, I'm not done yet.
Back to you, Mickey.
So that gets us, whoa, here we go, we're hot, okay. So that brings us back to where we are today. Obviously, it was a long road from, the first beginning thoughts of restoring the theater to finally restoring the theater. And it officially reopened on December 12th with a red carpet night on Broadway. Let's see if I have a picture of that. If you weren't here, it was a fantastic night. It was just totally packed inside here, and then outside in Losner Park, we had another 600 people who couldn't get into the theater, and we simulcast the performance inside, out on the park, on a giant screen. Red carpet, everyone dressed to the nines. It was just a fantastic night. We had about 1,000 people come out that night, which, funnily enough, was about the same amount of people who came out when the theater was opened in 1920 originally in the same spot, about 1,000 people. So it was a nice sort of circular, coming all the way back around on itself. Talking about one of the things that I think is the most exciting part of the theater today is that it was not just restored as a movie theater. It was restored as a cultural and a performing arts center. Because, as we've seen, as we've talked about today, the landscape for films and movies has changed dramatically over the past century. And these days, it's moving at light speed. The different types of digital entertainment you have, you can't keep up with what the newest app is going to be or the newest thing your TV is going to do is. But one thing that's remained static throughout history is the live performing arts. A production of Shakespeare or a symphony by Mozart can be just as powerful and done the same way today as it was done 400 years ago. And people still want to come see it because in the end, that's still so important to people. The live performing arts are so powerful. And while there's new creations that happen, there's new developments that happen, we also still have those originals. And so I think what's important is that now that this building is a performing arts center, we've really ensured the future of it in here in Homestead, because the movies can change, entertainment can change, but the performing arts will remain. As long as humans are humans and people want to enjoy basic live performing arts, the theater will remain. So, we've talked about the past and the present. Here we are today where we're trying to find things that people want to see, but the future is that we've secured a place for the Seminole Theater in downtown Homestead by bringing back the live performing arts. And I hope that, I'll be around for a long time to see all of that happen. So that's the end. Thank you very much. Now, I'd love to open it up if anybody else has stories about the theater or questions that we might be able to answer, anything like that. Oh, I will mention that.
The question of parking,
Yes, sir.
where is it?
It's 1 block south on 1st Street. If you turn right past Stickenstein's, there's a free municipal lot out back. It used to be the old police department lot. It's now a free municipal lot back out there. And they've added a lit pathway that comes through to Maori. And at nights, the police the police will sit there during performances as well, because we want to make sure it's a safe area for everyone.
It's fenced in.
Yes, it is fenced in. I'm sorry?
Might mention it in your brochure.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's probably a good thing to put in our brochure. We're trying to highlight that on our website. And when you buy a ticket, it tells you in the confirmation email where to go and where to look for that sort of stuff. But thank you for bringing that up.
Is there going to be a rental program where
for a group to rent part of the program or part of your facility here?
Certainly, yeah. It's already, you know, our Seminole series right now is really only looking at, we have 12 shows this spring. By next season, you know, we might expand to having 30 shows over the course of a year, but that still leaves another 330 days in the year. So there's a lot to fill in here, and we are already doing lots of rentals. You know, I'm happy to say we'll be hosting Miss Homestead later this month, and we're working with a lot of other local groups. I think we're looking at almost every high school wants to do their graduation here, which is exciting. And you know, we just want to fill the space with as many things that we can fill it with. Just yesterday, we were happy to have the book fair come into our lobby and have authors be in the lobby there. So yes, every day this theater should be filled with something, and it could be many different types of things. As Harriet mentioned, we have classrooms, we have a terrace up there. There's lots of functions that can happen in the building, and we encourage everyone to come to us. If you have an idea of something that can happen, we want it to happen here.
I just want to share how happy I am to have this theater open, because I moved here in 1998, and shortly after that, this gigantic sign went up. And I said, I'm going to have theater in Homestead. So,
And here we are.
finally happened.
Yes.
That's an important, I don't know if everybody knows how that theater sign came up, but that was an actual contribution. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? Yeah. The Seminole Theater was a contribution from the villagers. It's up there in Coral Gables. They paid for that and made that sign possible for us. So that was an amazing contribution, a wonderful thing that they did for the city of Homestead.
What did you say, the villagers?
The Villagers is an organization of historic preservationists in Coral Gables. They actually paid for and paid for the installation of that sign.
I was told it had been a donation.
Yes, yeah, but this is the organization that actually did the donation.
Okay, thank you.
And I don't know if you know, the actual theater was designated, a locally designated landmark in 2002, and Larry Deal was on the board at that time, of the Historic Preservation Board, and I think you were part of that designation, working on that project.
We also had 2 palm trees removed out front that were part of the Rotary donation from the 1920s, so that would be accessible handicapped loading zone out front. And Ruth Campbell and I fought over the designation. She thought that was a big mistake. And I later admitted to her I think she was right. But at this point, I think we both come to terms with the fact that we need to have an open space out front to load and discharge passengers.
Yeah, and people don't realize that the 327 trees that line Chrome Avenue from below Maori to Northwest 20th were all designated historic. So anytime one of those trees is damaged in any way, our board goes out there in front of the city and says, we want that tree to be replaced immediately, because we fight for every one of those trees to protect them.
I would like to say something in reference to the parking. The parking that's over there behind the old police parking area. If you're heading north, that lane that you will get over to, I can see the sign that's posted on the building. That lane is going south. So you can't, you know, you're illegal if you turn there. So I think they need to address that turn lane so that you can turn before Maori. Otherwise, you have to go to Maori, make a left, go around the block back. But the sign is right there on that building that says extra parking. So that lane needs to be adjusted to accommodate people coming in from the south.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We brought this up. You know, Chrome is a state of Florida road, so it's really hard to have, you know, too many things change without going through an act of Congress practically. But I'll tell you what, it's very helpful is when we have events, is to have the Homestead City Police down there directing traffic. And I think that's going to be the solution to that problem, is to make sure somebody is posted down there when there's production going on here and helping people make that turn who are coming in from the south. But that's a really important point you brought up.
Anything else? Questions, comments, fun stories? Yes?
Hi, I'm Jessica from Chestnut. I wanted to make sure to let you know that opening this has brought saw it with the Drifters, we saw it with the first night. We were like, oh my God, we have so many people here. That a couple of our locals that would come on a Friday night, I didn't have space for them. I had an hour wait at 5:30 in the afternoon, which never, I've been there for 4.5 years and that's never happened. So I wanted to thank you, by the way. So,
Thank you for bringing that up. I mean, that's obviously a huge point of the whole downtown redevelopment, including this theater, is that we want the whole downtown to thrive. And not just that people come in to see a show and leave, but that people are spending time downtown and everyone can benefit from it. Oh, I'm sorry. It's Jessica. Jessica from Chefs on the Run, and what she was mentioning is that in only our 3 events that we've had so far, that they've seen dramatic results as far as their attendance at their restaurant. That just there's lines, and so, you know, it's just a testament to that we can bring people downtown. It's not a forsaken land. People will come down here, businesses can thrive, and it can really be a great downtown, and those are the steps we're trying to make.
Jessica is a longtime Homestead resident, and she's the young lady who told me about the talent shows they used to have here at the Seminole Theater. This was the original The Voice and Homestead Idol, and they would have talent shows on Wednesday night, and the winners won, what did you say, like $100 or $50? But that was during the time when it was a Spanish-speaking movie theater, and they also did talent shows here. Maybe we can do Homestead Idol again.
And I'm happy to say we have someone local who already came in, and he's doing a talent show of some local dance troupes. So they'll be here in March. So we're bringing that back full circle. Great. Yes, ma'am.
Question about the acoustics for
Yes.
the live stage. How are they?
I don't know. You tell me. You hear okay? Yes. I mean, turn this off. See what it's like. There we go. I'm off now. I would think for most speakers, or even for a normal play, not a musical, you could probably get away, and the acoustics are probably, I'm not sure about all the way in the back, although I think it's not too bad, because I yell at people from back there. The acoustics, they did a pretty good job with this modern design. Of course, as soon as you have, amplified music, anything like that, you suddenly need all kinds of things. You can see we have a large speaker cluster up here. We have some more to support the balcony, and when we have bigger concerts, we bring in even more. But I think the acoustics are fairly good, and it's something that we will be continuing to work on and crafting.
How many people came for John Sakata's concert? That was an amazing evening, and that was when the theater was completely full. And we talked to him afterwards. He said this is exactly the type of performing venue that he likes to perform in, because the sound is great, small audiences, intimacy, and I think that's something unique to what the theater provides performers. You have an intimacy with the patrons that is not possible in places like the Cultural Arts Center up the road. So I think we're going to see some really interesting acts coming down here and looking to perform in our theater because of this unique position that we have of how many were 400?
We have 418 fixed seats in the theater.
Seats, right.
So
it almost has a nightclub venue feeling to it.
Yeah, certainly our 3 concerts so far, people have just been getting up out of their seats and dancing. I think for all 3 we managed to get people up out of their seats dancing. So it's just fantastic because, you have that proximity to the audience. I can walk right out here, and if I were a performing artist, I can get right in your face, whether you like it or not.
Sakata took the audience up on the stage.
You thought about posting events other than your music series on your calendar for the Seminole so that people are aware of some of the things going on in Homestead?
Yes.
What we really lack here is one centralized place to let people know about events. But
You're saying events other than what's happening just in the theater?
Well, initially,
Okay.
that's happening in the theater.
Right.
would be helpful.
Yes. Yeah, we're working on a better system to streamline that right now.
Will you be posting tickets, or how will people attend the Miss Homestead pageant?
They do their own tickets, so I actually look into that. But when I find out, like Larry said, we would have that on our calendar, and then we would link to whatever they wanted it to say.
Since the Cultural Arts Center in 10 miles away from here was mentioned, maybe you could get together with them and it would be an incentive to some of the performers up there to make a 2-night stay down here in South Florida instead of a whole trip where they may hesitate to come down for either theater.
An interesting idea. It'd be interesting to see if we could work anything out like that. The funny thing about most touring artist contracts is that generally you have what's called a radius clause, and that you don't let anybody perform within 60 miles of your venue, because if I was doing the same show as the Cultural Arts Center, obviously that we would be sharing a lot of the same audiences. But it is an interesting idea, and we do work on packaging a lot of things like that, but generally with people even a little bit farther away. So I could talk to somebody in Key West, for instance, and see what they're bringing down, because you can stop in Homestead, and you can stop in Key West, you can stop, you could stop somewhere north of Miami and put together a little route. And so that's what we're working on. One reason why we're looking at mostly concerts this spring is because we started in what's considered the middle of the booking season in January. Normally, touring acts start in August, September, and go through June of the following year. So most acts had their schedule set already. So it's difficult for them to swing, to the southernmost tip of Florida. But you work all that stuff out in advance so that you're on their route and they know where they're going. Certainly, most people are more than happy to come to South Florida in December or January.
Do you have your own website or page?
Do www.seminoletheater.org. If you grab a brochure on your way out, it's on there.
It's T-R-E, not
Yes, theater with an R-E, like the British spelling.
So you want to
All right, thank you.